Hello there guys, how are you doing? Welcome back to Rule of Two Review. So, in no surprise, what I want to do today is discuss a little bit more of Metroid Samus Returns, because as of today, as of right now, the time of recording this video, I am right at the very end of the game. I have one last Metroid to find, which then, to my knowledge, of course, tells me it's time to go and defeat the final boss, which I'm assuming is still the Queen Metroid, just like it was in the original release of Metroid 2 back in the day on the Game Boy. I, of course, have not had that spoiled for me, so I don't know what sort of weird changes and twists they've done to the end of the game. But I can't imagine that one of the things they would have done was change the final boss from the Queen Metroid. Regardless, I know at this point, a lot of you guys have probably already completed the game. It's been about 2 weeks since it came out, maybe a little bit longer. I am one busy son of a gun, so I don't have so much time to just run through games super quick. Even with a brand new Metroid, which I've pretty much filled almost all of my gaming time with the exception of a little bit of Destiny 2 with my friends. I just don't get to play through games that fast anymore. Also, I really wanted this game, at least the first playthrough, to last absolutely as long as possible. So, I'm really excited. About 2.5 weeks in, I'm finally ready to complete this game. But the reason I'm talking to you now about this, even though I have yet to finish it with, I've played 98% of this game at this point, 99%, is I wanted to discuss really what Nintendo chose to do with Samus Returns, and if it was the right call or not, and more maybe even what some people think would have been the right call. I think it's an important thing to discuss in an era where Nintendo has the Switch out and it's changing the game and changing the fortunes and the fates of Nintendo in pretty much nothing but a positive way. The fact we know a brand new console Switch Metroid game in Metroid Prime 4 is coming out soon, if I could speak right, and basically build off from there. So, when it comes to Samus Returns, the big question I'm asking today and discussing is, was it smart or the right decision for them to release this game on the 3DS? Now, I ask this a little bit less for myself, because I'm pretty satisfied with what this game is and even the platform it's on, but more for the larger audience, and what's going on with the fact that a lot of people were disappointed that this game was on the 3DS. A lot of folks don't have 3DSs now, or traded them in, or sold them, they just don't have one anymore, which I think is sort of a silly move to make. I don't know why you wouldn't hold on to your 3DS still for at least another year, but it is what it is. And for those reasons, and I do certainly understand that, at some point you just don't have every platform available, so that is a very natural thing, I get that. But still, through these reasons and others, a lot of people have felt like, well, maybe this game would have been better on the Switch. I would have preferred to have Metroid Samus Returns on the Nintendo Switch. And there is a lot of excitement to that idea. And is this something where maybe Nintendo should have made this game for the Nintendo Switch? So here's the thing. I'm going to start off really easy with this one and say, in so many ways, I can probably admit to you that, yeah, sure, it would have been great to have a brand new 2D side-scrolling Metroid adventure on the Switch. It could have been something that kind of looked or played kind of closer to an indie game. They could have gone with an art style that's more of a hand-drawn sprite thing as opposed to a polygonal-based, or they could have even made the 100% exact same game as Samus Returns with the exact same graphic engine, only enhanced, and released that on the Switch. And there would have been a lot of benefits to that. I agree 100%. We're going to get a better looking game. We might have more abilities, more cool, fun features and things that the Switch would allow you to do with the extra horsepower that the 3DS is not able to accomplish. Maybe it would be a longer game. Maybe some sort of online thing or a multiplayer thing might have been easier to do or make sense and hopefully not distract from the game. You know, and it could have looked fantastic. It could have looked really, really incredible and even changed some of the art style or whatever. And yeah, that actually really could have been great. Not to mention, you might even be able to argue that it would reach more people, and that might seem weird because we know the 3DS has far more units out there than the Switch does at this point, absolutely. But the Switch feels like a more active console than what the 3DS feels like. More people are buying them, more people are playing on them. I don't think there's too many people out there who are still playing on their 3DSs. I know a lot of people, including a lot of the fellow Juices Loose crew, who are literally playing on their 3DS for probably the last time just because this game came out. And this was the one game that got them to keep their 3DS or turn their 3DS on ever again. And I'm sure that there are a lot of people who are that way. And if a brand new Metroid 2D game would have released for the Switch instead, maybe that wouldn't have been the case. And more people would be playing it. It might even sell more, even though there's only 5-6 million Switches out there. I think there's a strong case for that having been the truth. But I know this is crazy, and a lot of you guys are going to yell at me and think I'm just totally wrong here. But I am not afraid to say that I don't necessarily think that Metroid Samus Returns should have been made for the Switch. I think it was actually a brilliant decision for them to release it on the 3DS. The first reason I think that is the less fun reason and more the business reason, which is it becomes a great way to keep people still interested and invested in the 3DS, which we've learned over the last several months that is still Nintendo's plan for at least the time being, at least the next year. They are still dedicated to a degree to the 3DS. They understand we got 60, 70 million of these things out there in people's hands. We sell sometimes so many pieces of software with the Mario games and the Pokemon games and whatnot, some of our first-party games that we release on the 3DS. And to release a brand new Metroid, the first game with Samus in 7 years, and a game people have been clamoring for forever, to release it on the 3DS could very likely bode very well for the 3DS as a piece of hardware. And still, in 6 years after the thing has been released, and we know eventually they're going to move on from it, they're still able to find a way with one key piece of software to still kind of move some 3DS units into people's homes, and people are still going out to buy them because the fan fervor for Metroid and for Samus is so strong that people are willing to do it. Whether they never had a 3DS and it's finally time to buy one, whether they want to get that Samus Special Edition, whether they sold or traded in or gave away their 3DS or lost it or whatever, and they wanted to get a brand new one because of Samus Returns, it becomes a smart business investment to do so. And while that's less fun for us to talk about and agree with, I have to give them that and say, you know what, it's a smart business decision, and so there you go. Now, what I'll also say is, for myself as a fan, I like the 3DS just because the Switch is out and is a way better piece of hardware than the 3DS is now in 2017. Doesn't mean that I still look at the 3DS and think, oh, you're bad now just because it's 6 years later and something newer has come along. Like, that's not the way I look at gaming or gaming hardware, and maybe a lot of people don't, and if that's how you look at things, then that's fine. You're always putting a time cap on every piece of hardware and every game you play, and I think that that's less fun. I can look at the 3DS and acknowledge it for what it is, even though it's not the year that it launched. When it launched, it was a great thing, and it gave us 6 years of amazing games and gameplay experiences, and in my opinion, that's not over now just because a newer, better thing has come along. And Samus Returns is an amazing example of that, because anyone who's played that game on the 3DS knows it is an incredibly impressive piece of software. The graphics, the way it runs, the way it plays, the gameplay and the controls, the 3D, the ability to use both screens, everything going on with this game on the 3DS is beyond impressive, and to me is worthy of playing as a brand new game in 2017, in a time where Nintendo has had the newer, doper, cooler, more amazinger Switch on the market for 6 months now. It's like, wow, this game is so well made and taking such great advantage of the hardware of the 3DS that I still think it feels just as modern now as if it would have released 5 years ago on the 3DS. Also, talking more from like a gut feeling sort of perspective, which is obviously something that a lot of people won't be able to necessarily agree with, but for myself, something about Samus Returns, and this isn't a negative. If some people take it as a negative, that's on them, but I don't mean this as a negative. There's something about Samus Returns that just feels like it belongs on the 3DS, and it's beyond just the fact that it was made on the 3DS, so duh, it feels like a 3DS game. It's a 3DS game. Like, it's not that. It's more the essence of the game and the soul of the game and the feel of the game. Were this to have been on a different platform, I might even still say the same thing, like, man, this really would have just felt more at home on the 3DS. That's kind of my feeling about the game now, 99% through it. It's like, yeah, this game, the home should have been the console that they released it on. And it's hard for me to explain it beyond that, other than to just say it's like I said, it's the essence and the soul of the game. Feels like a 3DS experience, and that's what makes it fun for me to turn my 3DS on still and have a game as amazing as this game to play. Something else that I think really justifies this game being a 3DS title is the 3D, and I'm someone who loves the 3D on the 3DS, and some people want to groan at the 3D because they don't care, or maybe they have a 2DS so they don't have the option. To each their own, but I am one of those few people that stands by the 3D feature on the 3DS. I still, to this day, think it's cool and it's amazing, and I love playing games in 3D when they use the 3D well, like the Monster Hunter games do and a lot of Nintendo's first-party games. Samus Returns being hands down the best use of 3D I've ever seen in a 3DS game. And so I love having a reason to experience that. And what's really cool is because they chose to go back to the 2D perspective with this game and, remake a game that was in 2D, The way they built this game and the environments, it's basically very much a 3D space with 3D polygon environments and so many creatures and things and waterfalls and plant life moving around and living and breathing in the background. It further sucks me into the experience and into the world of what Samus Returns is into SR388. Like, it feels more like I'm there, even though I'm looking at a profile perspective of Samus running back and forth on my screen. I feel like I'm in there because the environments they created work so well when you've got that 3D on. And there are so many times where some of the effects come right at you with that little screen, and it looks incredible. You're like, whoa, that like came right at my face. Like, and it just feels amazing. Like, I think the 3D was intended to feel when Nintendo first created the hardware. I mean, I'll never forget early on, one of the first times I froze an enemy with the ice beam and then broke it apart with a missile. And, you know, ice chunks, as the creature explodes, the ice chunks go all over. There was an ice chunk that actually flew right at the screen. This happened like 1 or 2 times ever. And the first time it happened, it flew right at the screen, and I was like, holy crap, that looked insane. It literally looked like it was popping out of my 3DS at me, and I was like, that's awesome. And there's a couple of the more acrobatic moves that Samus does where she kicks her feet up into the screen, and it literally looks like she's jumping out at you from the 3DS. And so, you know, a lot of people don't care about that stuff, or they find it annoying, or it hurts their eyes, or whatever. And I can't tell you or anyone to enjoy 3D if you don't enjoy 3D. That's just how it is. I do enjoy 3D. I think it greatly enhances this game. It really takes advantage of the amazing environments in 3D that they built, in 3D polygons, I mean, that they built for this game. And that's something that, you know, even though we might have had better graphics and frame rates and whatever on the Switch, which would be nice, I think it's almost a worthy trade for how quality the 3D is in Samus Returns. So at the end of the day, I think that's how I ultimately feel. Just sort of spitballing some of my thoughts about this game and about Metroid as a series, the fact that it's finally back. Samus is back. We got 2 games to play. One brand new one, another one, I think, in 2019. You know, whenever that game decides to come, Metroid Prime 4, and maybe they give us the trilogy next year. I've discussed that as well in the past. You know, we've got a lot of Metroid to think about and to talk about, and we have the Switch in our hands, so what is the future of Metroid and Samus going to be after Samus Returns? And so it just got me thinking about Samus Returns as a game, and that's what I think. There would have been so many great, wonderful benefits to having the game on the Switch, and I certainly wouldn't have been complaining, but looking at the game that we had, playing through this amazing experience on the 3DS the way it was intended, I think it's great. I think it's perfect on the 3DS. I got no complaints. I'm happy to have this on the 3DS, Prime 4 on the Switch in a couple of years or whenever that game's ready to go. And I think it's all fine and dandy. But what do you guys think? Have you played Samus Returns? Have you completed it? Do you have a theory or a thought as to whether or not this game truly would have been better on the Switch? Or if you think it was great on the 3DS? Or maybe you don't care at all, in which case, why'd you watch the video? So that's going to be it for today, guys. Thanks, of course, as always, for tuning in. This is Rob of Relive to Review, and I'll catch you next time on another video.